Hello, this is the Kevin's Bookstore, and today we're gonna read The Molly Moon Stops the World. Chapter 3. Mrs. Trinkleberry had parked her rusty olive green car in the parking lot by the River Briar. Molly and Rocky pushed the car down the main street, past the butcher's where they often bought peculiar tasty scraps to eat, past the camera shop and the baker's. Soon they had loaded the trunk. Rocky set off to return the cart and to pick up some screws from the hardware store. Molly slid into the passenger seat and pulled her denim jacket around her. She began to pick at some of the foam that was bursting through the white vinyl upholstery and thought about what to do over the rest of the weekend. She might help Rocky make a go-kart or go down to the riding stables and ask for a lesson. Perhaps everyone might want to go for a swim at Briarsville Pools. None of these ideas really inspired Molly, though, for the truth was that what she really wanted to do, what she'd been dying to do for months, was some hypnotizing. But she couldn't. She'd promised Rocky she wouldn't. She and Rocky had agreed that hypnosis was a dangerous tool that would always land them in trouble. Rocky had also learned from Dr. Logan's book he could hypnotize people using a voice. Molly hadn't mastered voice hypnosis properly, but her powerful hypnotic eyes were far superior to Rocky's voice. Hypnotism had changed her life. For the very first time, Molly had known how it felt to be good at something. Molly missed feeling good like this. In fact, she missed it dreadfully. Life just wasn't as exciting without hypnotism. The promise she'd made was driving her crazy. Another thing had been perplexing Molly since Christmas. Lucy Logan, the person who had made sure that Molly had found and taken the book of hypnotism, had disappeared. Lucy was the great-granddaughter of the author of the book, and she had worked in the Briarsville Library. Lucy had hypnotized Molly to find the book in a library, and then, after learning its lessons and having some adventures, to return it to her. Molly thought Lucy was a completely brilliant person, and certainly the most special adult she had ever met. She felt she owed Lucy a big thank you, and she had been looking forward to making friends with her. But now Lucy Logan had vanished. She'd handed in her notice at the library in January and gone. The watery March light reflected on the cold surface of the river, where a grubby white duck and drake swam about. Molly watched them, trying to divert her mind from hypnotism and Lucy's disappearance. And then, without meaning to, Molly found herself wondering for the millionth time who her parents were. This question was like a mosquito that sometimes tried to fly into her life. When the question bit her, Molly couldn't help but itch it. If she was in a good mood, she would imagine her parents as interesting, fun people who, for some dreadful reason beyond their control, had lost their baby. When she was in a low mood, she saw her parents as two horrible people who had wanted to drown her like an unwanted kitten. But whatever mood she was in, thinking about them was always frustrating, because however hard she tried to picture them, Molly knew she would never know who they were. Molly shut her eyes and tried to calm her babbling mind. She was very good at doing this, as she'd perfected the art of daydreaming when she was very young. Soon she was breathing peacefully and imagining herself drifting upwards like a cloud out of Mrs. Trinkleberry's car and along the course of the river Briar, up into the hills and all the way up to its source and in the highest peak. Molly imagined that she was hovering, as she felt the weight of earth and the ancient quality of the mountains beneath her. She was reminded how huge the world was and how unimportant her worries were compared with it. Feeling refreshed, she opened her eyes. She took one of the baguettes out of a shopping bag and ripped off its end. Opening a new ketchup bottle, she knocked some sauce onto it. For a few minutes, Molly munched her favorite snack and looked out over the river. On the far bank, there were fenced-off gardens with terraced cottages beneath them. One garden was larger than the others. It seemed to have two cottages behind it. Some dense green hedges, clipped into the shapes of sitting birds and animals, had recently sprung up in this garden. On the top of one hedge, a huge bird with a long tail was shaped out of branches and leaves, and beside it was a crouching box hedge hare with two distinct ears. On the top of the yew bush sat a big dog with large, hollow eyes, looking as if he was guarding the house. The spring sunshine danced over the shiny foliage of the bush dog. As the light bounced off a glossy twig where his mouth might have been, the creature seemed to smile at Molly. Molly remembered how exciting it had been when she first hypnotized Petula last November. She sighed and popped the last piece of ketchupy bread into her mouth. It was so difficult keeping her promise not to hypnotize. It was like resisting the urge to walk on your hands once you'd learned, or like stamping on the impulse to jump high when you actually had the power to leapfrog a tree. Molly longed to experience again the warm fusion feeling that washed through her whenever she let her eyes reach their hypnotic peak. Now, as the dog's leafy eye twinkled at her, Molly was struck by an idea. She had only promised Rocky not to hypnotize anyone. She had never promised not to hypnotize things. The fusion feeling was lovely. It made Molly feel as if a tropical sun flowed in her veins. The voice in her head urged her on. Go on, give it a try, Molly. It will warm you up. Hypnotizing the bush dog. What are you afraid of? That'll jump over the river and bite you. Molly stared at the bush. Hypnotize a bush. A bush couldn't be hypnotized. Exactly, urged her mind. But it will make you feel nice. So, winding down the window, Molly focused in a special way at the trumpery dog. She found the faraway feeling inside herself that made everything apart from the dog, shaped bush look blurred. Then she searched for the feeling of bush in herself, and the more she stared at the bush, the more the leaves of the dog seemed to absorb her, and the more the sounds of the town grew muffled. Molly felt naughty. Rocky wouldn't be pleased if he knew she was doing this. She'd have to do it quickly before he got back. She waited for the fusion sensation to slowly rise through her body. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a hint of the feeling began, as if sparks of electricity were traveling up her backbone into her head to behind her eyes, where they circled and throbbed. Her mind felt slightly fizzy, and tiny zapping noises seemed to pop just inside her ears. But somehow something was different. The sensation flaring up in her was not the familiar fusion feeling. As Molly stared at the dog, her eyes pulsing, the sensation seemed to twist and mutate. Instead of being a warm tingling, it turned into an icy cold prickling under her skin, giving her goose pimples all over. Molly gasped in shock and immediately snapped out of a trance. A sharp clipping noise from across the river reached her ears, and Molly noticed a pair of steel shears snapping shut under the beak of the big topiary bird. She couldn't see the gardener, but whoever he was, he seemed intent upon keeping his bushes trimmed and tidy, keen to control the wild growth of private hedge creatures. In the side mirror, Molly saw fat Mrs. Trinkleberry wrapped in a crocketed coat, lugging bags of woolbag toward the car. Molly's hypnotic experiments would have to wait. As Mrs. Trinkleberry approached, Molly saw that she was looking very flustered. Just look at this terrible news, she declared, dropping a newspaper on Molly's lap. The paper shouted out its headline, Child Star Disappears. Underneath, there was a photograph of Davina Nuttall, dressed in an astronaut costume for her role in Stars on Mars. Davina Nuttall missing from outside her Manhattan home. Mink glove found at scene. New York police treating the case as abduction. Mrs. Trinkleberry was beside herself with worry. The poor girl, her poor parents. Can you imagine it, Molly? Molly could easily. She'd had a first-hand experience of kidnapping since her very own Petulia had been abducted in New York. But she'd also actually met the famous Davina Nuttall, so the news was extra shocking. Even though Molly hadn't liked Davina much, she felt genuinely concerned for her now. That's horrible, she gulped. See, life for the famous isn't all fun, said Mrs. Trinkleberry, and touching like a chaffinch, she poked a cakey kiss on Molly's forehead. I'm peckish, aren't you? I hope Mr. N's cooking lunch. Look, I've got a video for us all to watch this afternoon. It's got Gloria Heelhart in it. It's the one she won her Best Actress award for last year. She's marvelous. It'll take our minds off Davina. As they drove home, Mrs. Trinkleberry sang along to the radio, trying to cheer herself up. She was thrilled that the child pop star Billy Bob Bimble was number one with his hit single, Magpie Man. Don't let him steal your heart, she trilled along. Still your heart, oh, don't let him have your heart, got it from the start. Ooh, I'll steal your heart, Magpie Man, oh. Once the sun and the stars and you, Magpie Man. 20 minutes later, they arrived at Happiness House. The front of the building was crisscrossed with scaffolding poles. Half of the building was a pristine white, while the other half was still its old grey flasky self. Petulia shot out the front door like a Black Fury missile. She jumped onto Molly's lap, wagging her curly, stumpy tail, and dropped a present off a stone. Then she turned around, raced back across the gravel, and came out of the house with a letter between her teeth. Thank you, Petulia, said Molly, taking the soggy envelope and peering at it. Molly's name had been printed in neat letters in green ink, but they had smudged, and the address had been licked off. Obviously, Petulia had been looking after the envelope for a while. Help me with this bags, could you, Molly? Asked Rocky. They're so heavy, they're cutting into my fingers. Molly put the envelope into a pocket and took a bag from him. That was why she didn't read the letter until later.